Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. We will give just a few minutes for guests to arrive in the Zoom room. It's been interesting operating in a hybrid world, having back-to-back meetings. Some are in person and some are on Zoom, and moving from different spaces to find our rightful places can take a little more grace. As you log into the room, if you wouldn't mind dropping your name and affiliation in the chat so we have a sense of who is here with us today, that would be great. Name, title, organization would be helpful.
Someone let me know that it says that the chat
Chat
is
is
disabled.
disabled. Got it. I appreciate you all letting me know you're with us. All right, in just 1 minute, we will go ahead and get started. All right. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Dr. Erica McCrae, and I'm a professor of special education and one of the associate deans at the University of Florida. And I also have the great privilege of directing the Cedar Center and OSEP, Office of Special Education Programs funded Technical Assistance Center. And I'll be your moderator today. And I am thrilled to be in today's session and hope you are too. So thank you all for joining us. And I see the chat has been enabled and you are letting us know who you are and where you're coming from. So good morning and good afternoon. Our panel today will bring together policymakers, practitioners, and advocacy organizations to discuss and share insights on how to effectively support and empower the talented and often overlooked group of students that are post-secondary students with disabilities. Just a few housekeeping notes before I welcome our panelists. The team has turned on closed captioning and it should be live on your screen. If you experience any difficulties, please let a member of the Hunt Institute know in the chat. Additionally, today's session will be recorded and publicized after the webinar. After the session, the Hunt Institute will send the recording along with key takeaways to all attendees. Lastly, we'll have time for Q&A at the end of today's session, so please submit your questions using the Q&A feature. With that, I'm honored to be joined by three incredible panelists. We'll start with John Samuel. John is the co-founder and CEO of Abler, a disability inclusion and digital accessibility company. His focus is on helping organizations be more inclusive by making digital content accessible for people of all abilities. John's passion for his work is very personal as he is blind. John wants to make sure the obstacles he has faced are removed for others. His experience includes stints in domestic and international industries over the last 15 years. He serves on the board of directors for the Arvin Eye Foundation, the largest eye care provider in the world, and is a public speaker who loves connecting with people and telling impactful stories. John knows no barriers. He holds an MBA from George Washington University, a BS in accounting from North Carolina State University, and is a certified professional in accessible core competencies. John, we're so glad you're able to join us today. Will you please discuss the work of Abler and how it helps create inclusive pathways for individuals with disabilities that are entering the workforce?
Thank you so much for having me here and for everyone's participation. And I think it perfectly, fits well that, we go through these challenges because I think all of us on this panel are problem solvers, and this is part of our daily life. So excited to be here. So at Abler, we actually have a very simple mission. Our mission is to remove the barriers for people with disabilities. And based on my own lived experiences going through my education and my professional life, I realized there was a few things that we had to address if we wanted to make sure that people of all abilities were able to pursue a career and all aspects of their life without barriers. And so the first thing we decided to do is we had to eliminate the digital divide. And we're doing that through digital accessibility services. This means making sure that websites and digital content of all sorts are accessible for all people, no matter what assistive technologies they may use or what type of disability they may have. And so we launched a digital accessibility practice leveraging individuals with disabilities to solve those issues. We also realized that we had to change the minds of people of organizations. And so we're doing that through our disability inclusion training modules. And we developed a 5-module program that was kind of really lives the mantra of nothing about us without us. And so it includes individuals with disabilities in all aspects of the creation of it, from the design and content creation to then also making sure that the individuals in the videos represented the community itself. And with those two lines of our business, the digital accessibility and disability inclusion services, we realized that actually builds up demand for talent. And so to meet the supply, we launched a workforce development program to create pathways for employment. And right now we launched a program with the state of North Carolina back in October 2022. And the whole program is designed to train individuals with disabilities, primarily people who are blind, to pursue careers in tech. And if we can get individuals in tech trained up with the skills that are needed to enter the tech field, we'll really be able to meet that demand, and we're super excited about that.
That's awesome, John. Thanks so much. I look forward to learning more with you during our time together today.
Thank you.
Up next, I am thrilled to introduce Katie Nees, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services at the United States Department of Education. In this capacity, she serves as advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Education on matters related to the education of children and youth with disabilities, as well as employment and community living for youth and adults with disabilities. The mission of her office is to improve early childhood, educational, and employment outcomes, and to raise expectations for all people with disabilities, their families, their communities, and the nation. Katie, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, and appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel. And I hope folks get the information that they hope to receive. As Dr. McCray said, I'm with the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services here at the U.S. Department of Education. We refer to it as OSERS, and OSERS has two key components. One is the Office of Special Education Programs, and at the Office of Special Education Programs, we support states in their supervision of school districts who are implementing the federal special education law and also the federal early intervention law for infants and toddlers with disabilities and their families. We also administer discretionary grants, including professional development and technical assistance centers, and that those are designed to support state systems in making sure that the people who are responsible for making decisions have the knowledge base and access to evidence-based practices they need to do right on behalf of children with disabilities. The other side of the coin at OSERS is the Rehabilitation Services Administration, and RSA is the component that works with state vocational rehabilitation agencies who implement the federal employment law for people with disabilities. RSA also supports training and technical assistance activities to support VR agencies in meeting the needs of adults with disabilities who are seeking training and support in the world of work. A couple of things to just point over the last 18 months or so, OSEP has put out guidance in two significant ways. One was to help states understand the policies and procedures necessary to ensure that discipline wasn't used as a barrier for students with disabilities, particularly students of color, from accessing their education services. And just this year, we published guidance on general supervision, which is a statutory requirement for states to make sure that school districts and early intervention providers are following the letter and spirit of the law. What we found was there has been a lot of turnover over the last 5 or 6 years that wasn't helped by the pandemic, and that there are people in positions of authority who needed to have easy access to all the information they needed in order for them to be successful in their job. And so these two guidance documents were particularly important to try to address that gap. The last thing I'll say is both RSA and OSEP have an important role to play in youth transition from high school to the rest of their lives. And that we have launched under the leadership of our OSEP director, Valerie Williams, a new initiative to really help states, school districts, state vocational rehabilitation agencies to partner successfully in supporting high school youth and young adults to be able to transition to employment that is consistent with their wants and needs. So, Dr. McCray, I'll turn it back to you, but thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
We really appreciate your time. I have both personally and professionally benefited from OSERS and OSEP investment. So thank you all for continuing to do that work and making sure that funding is made available for the work to continue. Up next, I am thrilled to introduce Shahida Brown. Ms. Shahida Brown is the Director of Equity and Inclusion at the National Disability Institute. She has more than 10 years of experience working in the human services industry. She has a strong background working with people with disabilities, the unhoused, TANF, and underemployed populations. Shahida has held a host of positions throughout her career, which include Manager of Special Projects and Executive Support, Manager of Supportive Services, Vocational Specialist, Case Manager, Retention Specialist, and Psychiatric Rehabilitation Worker. To make a true impact, she specializes in program and project development and workforce development to streamline and advocate for better services for underrepresented populations. Shahida received her undergraduate degree in professional studies from CUNY Medgar Evers College and her graduate degree in public administration from the University of Baltimore. Shahida, thanks so much for joining us. Will you please share with us how the work of the National Disability Institute and building financial futures can impact equitable access to education for individuals with disabilities?
Thank you for that really great introduction. First, I want
It's
to
all
say,
you.
right? First, I want to say how happy I am to be invited to such an important panel discussion. This is such a great question because as a staff member at National Disability Institute, also known as NDI, I've had the pleasure of seeing NDI champion around addressing the overall unique financial challenges faced by individuals with disabilities. We've had the ability to train and spread awareness around the financial health of individuals with disabilities on a national level and working with many different stakeholders. The focus has always been change the narrative by helping to dispel some of the myths that's out there, which is working and disability don't go hand in hand, or being limited to a certain amount of hours of workable time or capacity levels, or that there's a learning deficit of some sort, right? All of these are myths. And for whatever reason, society is not trying to let go of them. So there is no surprise that the higher the education or level of training an individual receives, the further that their career can go. For some, particularly those with disabilities or in the disability community, they face an elevated level of equity challenges. And these challenges have led to prolonged result gains or disparaged them And unfortunately, some start to believe some of those myths that I just mentioned. I've always been stunned by the amount of people who inform me that they are not aware that individuals with disabilities often incur higher expenses compared to those without disabilities. NDI, we recognize that providing accurate information about accessing financial education to empower people with disabilities is crucial. By equipping them with financial literacy, they can make those informed decisions about managing finances effectively. Accessing this information sometimes can be hard, and we want to help the field and society strengthen this skill set because it gets or keeps people with disabilities out of poverty. So like I mentioned previously, education is a key pathway out of poverty for all individuals, and those with disabilities are no different. Access to education is essential for everyone to pursue career pathways. And what ends up happening is we want to make sure that the individuals are independent, that they are choosing their paths in life themselves and it's not being dictated by family or society. Their career can improve their financial circumstances and they get to live a life the way that they want to. We also think about education. You know, I know that question seems simple, but it's so much broader. It's a big question. We also think about education in a broader sense and work diligently to educate and inform various stakeholders, including educational institutions, financial counselors, workforce professionals, and believe it or not, even the disability service providers. These efforts aim to create an ecosystem that assists people with disabilities to achieve financial wellness, including how to access education, look for affordable educational avenues, how to finance education, and also help them with furthering their employment opportunities. Just to share an example, for instance, there's a student earned income exclusion, which is called SEIE. NDI informs individuals about SEIE, which is a work incentive that allows SSI recipients under the age of 22 to earn income while regularly attending school without a significant reduction in their SSI benefits, right? There's this fear that if they pour into themselves, then there's going to be some finances will be taken away from them. And it's actually the opposite. If you pour into yourself and you go into educational pathways, SSI is encouraging that, right? And then the last thing I'll say before we'll move on is that NDI also educates the population about ABLE National Resource Center about achieving a better life experience. That's what ABLE stands for, achieving a better life experience. And ABLE accounts are tax advantage savings accounts designed for individuals who become disabled before the age of 26, and they can make a contribution up to $14,000 a year, but they can use this funding, meaning that their family can pour into that account, all types of ways that they can get that funding and they can use that to finance their education. So I'll stop there, but it was just so much that I needed to say for that one question.
Thank you so much for that, Shahida. I heard so many nuggets in there. You're not only thinking about direct services and making sure that individuals with disabilities have a sense of agency, but that we're also helping society understand differently so that we're able to better remove barriers. All right.
Exactly.
All right, John, I'm going to come back to you if that's okay.
Yes.
Will you please discuss your positionality as a blind man and as you think about even intersecting identities and how that informs your work with Abler?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. You know, I'm originally born and raised here in Cary, North Carolina, and as I was growing up, I guess my identity really was around being one of very few Indian kids growing up, Indian descent, growing up in Cary. And as I grew up, that kind of was my identity. I was an Indian kid growing up in North Carolina. And as I was going through high school, I started noticing changes in my eyesight. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought initially I was just a bad driver. or I was just a bad student and just wasn't getting the content that I was on the board because I couldn't see it. But when I got to college, that's when I started realizing that there was something off with my eyes and I needed to get checked out. And that's when I was diagnosed with a degenerating eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa and was told I was going blind. And at that moment, my life changed and I didn't know how to handle it. Um, the first things that went through my mind were, what girl wants to be with the guy who can't see? And then it was like, what kind of job could I have if I was blind? And then I didn't even know where I could live. Not in North Carolina, I didn't think. If you couldn't drive, I didn't think you could get around here or have a career. So I really struggle with those things. And it impacted me, right? Not thinking that I could have a family, a wife, or any of those things because of I was blind. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had never had any exposure to people with disabilities, or at least who identify with a disability and talked openly about it. And so I felt very alone at that time, and I kept it a secret. And so as I was going through college, I kept it a secret. And after graduating, I left North Carolina. I went out to India for a couple years, then New York City. And all of these times I was leaving my home, my home state of North Carolina, where it seems like everyone in the world wants to move to because it's the best place to live. I just didn't feel like it was a place for somebody with a disability. And that took me around the globe. And the whole time I was, keeping my secret, keeping my vision loss as a secret, because I was ashamed of it. I was embarrassed by it. And I thought if I was ashamed and embarrassed by it, others would, also not really understand it. Because if I can't understand it, how could others? And so I kept it a secret for almost 16, 17 years. And the first time I started openly talking about my vision loss and really making it part of my identity was when I went to grad school. And I was actually at this orientation event for my MBA program, and they had assigned seats, and I couldn't see where I was supposed to go. So I turned to the person next to me for help. And it happened to be the associate dean of the business school. Her name was Liesl Riddle. And Liesl had no idea that I couldn't see because I never disclosed it when I was applying to grad school. And she could empathize with me because she actually had a child with special needs, and she encouraged me to be open about my vision loss. And for the first time in my life, I started openly talking about my vision loss. And I felt like it was the first time I could be my true, authentic self. And I was able to open up my heart for the very first time. And I met my wife. And that was one of the things. I didn't think I could ever find a partner who could accept me for who I was. But I did. I was able to find love once I was open about my vision loss. But when it came to work, I thought companies would see it as a liability. So I kept it a secret. And, when I had phone interviews, they all went great. But when people met me in person, that's when things went off track. It was because I didn't know how to advocate for myself. I didn't know how to, I didn't have the confidence in myself and my own abilities to be able to explain to organizations what I needed to be successful. And so I struggled, but I eventually landed on my feet and I got a job with an investment firm. But after a few years, I lost that job and I was out of a job again. This time I had a wife and a baby, and we had built a house in DC. And the stress of it caused my sight to go even faster. And up until this point, I was able to get by utilizing screen magnification software in inverted colors to get by. But now nothing worked and I couldn't see the computer screen. And I thought my career was over. And it was a serendipitous encounter that introduced me to a gentleman named Ed Summers, who had the same eye condition as me and lived in North Carolina and actually in Cary. And when I met Ed, he was the director of accessibility at SAS. And he showed me that my career wasn't over. He introduced me to the world of accessibility. And, it was that exposure to somebody who could empathize with me, understood the challenges I was going through. And it already paved a path for me that it really kind of opened up my eyes to a career that I could come home and work in North Carolina. I could have a career as someone who's blind. And that really helped me embrace my disability and not see it as a liability, but to see it as an asset. And that's really helped me to become an entrepreneur. I joined LCI, which happens to be the largest employer of people who are blind in the country and located right here in North Carolina. And when I joined LCI, I got to see others who had the same lived experiences and were thriving in a company. in my backyard, in the same place I never thought I could ever come back home to. And it really, it opened up my perception of careers and what the abilities of people with disabilities could be. And I think that really helped me in becoming an entrepreneur and starting this business, because I realized that I was able to tap into those natural problem solving skills that I had been utilizing my whole life to kind of hide the fact that I couldn't see. I was able to be resilient. I was able to bounce back. And I was able to really just be, empathetic. I could understand, I could relate to people. And I think those three things, those three skills of problem solving, resiliency, and empathetic have really helped me to be a CEO and a leader of an organization. And it has a lot to do with the fact that I do have a disability, and it's something that's a big part of who I am today. And it's not everything about me, but it is a big part of me, and it's something I love about myself.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Just as a follow-up question, how does Abler, how does the culture of Abler, I'm getting a sense from you that it's a fun place to be and work. How does this influence the culture at Abler?
It really is. I don't know if I've talked to you or you've heard. I've been telling everybody we have a fun time at Abler. We really do. And like one of my favorite things is on Fridays, we have what we call our mullet meetings. And the mullet meeting is where we have business up front and then we have a dance party at the end. But we realize that the culture is such a big part of Abler. And we realized this. It took us a couple, it took us a year really in our business to understand how important culture was and the type of people that we surrounded ourselves with. And we really rallied around our core values of grit. So growth mindset, relationships, initiative, and trust. And when we realized that these core values meant so much to our culture as a team and what we were looking for in folks that join our organization, everything fell into place, and we can really enjoy those mullet meetings on Friday now. And I think our customers and partners like it too.
I might have to adopt that. At first I was like, is it mullet hair or mullet fish? I would be okay with either.
Well, if you want to come join our mullet meeting, you come on over on Fridays. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that invitation. Okay, just to shift gears a little bit, Katie, the Department of Education is known for developing, and as you mentioned earlier, the guidance documents around supporting policy. How are you all thinking about equity, thinking about disability as an aspect of identity, as you're writing and refining policy for workforce and employment opportunities?
Yeah, thank you for that. And John, I love the mullet. I love that. I think we should all adopt that. How exciting. So as I was listening to John's journey, I was thinking about we at OSERS are really prioritizing how to make more effective the implementation of school to work transition. And over the course of the last year, we have, through the Rehabilitation Services Administration, put out a series of grants this year that went to 20 states to help them really take a hard look of why is it that we have in the federal special education law, we have a requirement that transition services begin a child's individualized education program no later than age 16. Now, most of us think that's too late, that we should be starting this conversation of what do you want to do when you grow up, when kids are little, and what expectations should you have for your life. We want kids to think about what it is they want to do when they grow up and then plan accordingly. So we have that requirement. We also have the requirement that under the Rehabilitation Act, that state vocational rehabilitation agencies have to spend 15% of their federal funds on pre-employment transition services. So on the special ed side of it, we have the requirement that services be provided. And on the rehab side, we have a requirement that services should be paid for, right? So you would think problem solved, right? We should just go home. Well, our data showed that about 38% of students with disabilities are actually receiving pre-employment transition services, which means 62% are not. So we, this year, through what we call the Disability Innovation Fund, put out a little more than $200 million to states to really try to crack this nut. And one of the things that's different about this opportunity is that we required, and the applicants could be state departments of education, state vocational rehabilitation agencies, but they had to partner with their state centers on independent living. And the reason we thought that was important was just for what John was saying, is we want self-advocacy skills to be part of what students leave high school with, to know what's important to them, to be able to articulate what's important to them, and then to know how to act when they are trying to get that. And so we are hoping that this initiative will kind of change the dynamic so that even though we have these very clear policies in federal law, we need real humans to be able to implement them. And so it's not just enough to have the agency folks there, but we need the self-advocates and people who can train people to be better self-advocates as part of the solution, so that we can have youth leaving high school with a better sense of self and a better sense of where it is that they want to go and what it's going to take to get them there. So we're pretty excited about it. And again, it just started. It's a 5-year journey that these states will be on, and hopefully we will be learning important lessons along the way. I think just the other thing that we've been doing, we just publicized this week a new center on significant disproportionality. And what that center is designed to do to help state departments of education and school districts where they may have a higher percentage of students with disabilities from diverse backgrounds than maybe the population census would expect. And so why is that? States have to collect this data, but then they didn't really know what to do about it. You know, I have this data, now what do I do? I just admire the problem, or is there something we can do to address what's behind it? And that's what this center is designed to do, to help states look at the root cause of these things, and with the hope that students with disabilities can get the services and supports that they need in the most appropriate setting for as long as they need it. So we're excited about that opportunity as well.
We will stay tuned for what that center learns and how we can access that information, Katie. You mentioned partnerships. So Shahida, talk to us about the many partnerships that NDI is involved in, and what strategies are you all using to establish and maintain those partnerships? Because this is complex work. It's not just one system or institution that has to play nicely together to support individuals with disabilities.
Great question. So creating partnerships is a valuable strategy and definitely helps to advance our mission. As an organization, one of the biggest challenges is creating partnerships is often convincing potential partners to collaborate, right? The minute someone hears disability, sometimes it makes them uncomfortable, right? So we have to figure out ways to make them comfortable and let them know it's okay, we're here and we're going to help you through this process, right? So getting them to the point to understand that the disability community is in their community, is in their organization, is in the educational institution. Pretty much it's all around us, right? So after we help them with that understanding, we come to the table with something valuable to offer without expecting immediate reciprocation, right? By demonstrating that NDI can do something for its partners, whether it's sharing our expertise, our resources, or just providing them the support that they may need through this change that they're going through, right? We want to establish trust and some goodwill. how to talk about, so for instance, an example is some organizations, we have to take it back to the point of how do they talk about people with disabilities in a respectful manner, right? Are you using the person first format? Some people are like, well, what is that, right? So we kind of gauge where the organizations are and what it is that they need from NDI first off. The partnerships also we're involved with it's different individuals and different organizations, and we're definitely competing with a lot of, or I shouldn't say competing, we're doing a lot of different projects at the same time, right? So we have to use different ways of communication for each of the projects. And what that means is we have to figure out what does the organization prefer, right? To accommodate all of these different moving parts, we have to remain flexible in our approach. We make sure that our meetings are concise when possible, and offer multiple communication options, such as we got email, you have meetings, you may have just you have to sometimes just pick up the phone. I know people are like, wait, you pick up the phone? Yes, I still pick up the phone because time is of the essence sometimes, right? And you just need to get to people. So we want to accommodate our partners as much as we can and just remain flexible. With that being said, to maintain the strong partnerships, we place a significant emphasis on regular and open communication. We don't operate in a, okay, you hire us, we're partners, and then NDI does all of the work. That would never be feasible, right? It won't be lasting. It won't be a lasting impact. We really stress the collaboration with our partners so they continuously stay involved, and we give them opportunities to share updates on their work and make introductions when relevant. Consistent communication helps to foster a sense of collaboration and shared goals among the partners. So sometimes magic happens because the different organizations that we bring into the room, they then develop their own relationships, and then something even bigger comes out of it. So we see that as a success, even if that means that NDI isn't a part of what just came out of it, right? I always say also that if you want true equity, you have to be able to listen. As much as we want our partners to listen to us, we have to also be able to listen to them. Listening, I feel, has been extremely crucial, or has been a crucial aspect to successful partnership building. We listen to our partners because without doing that, then we wouldn't know what challenges they may have or what unmet needs they may have, right? So if we just take a step back and get that information first, then we can strategize how best to get them to whatever end goal they're trying to meet, or where they're trying to go. And it doesn't mean that it's going to happen overnight, but it does mean that the process has started, right? And sometimes that's enough to at least just start. So by emphasizing and recognizing the unique struggles that the partners are facing, we can, like I said, tailor and support and give them the resources to address those specific issues. This approach, in my mind, strengthens the partnerships and demonstrates why NDI is always an asset at being at the table, right? So there's just so many examples I can say. Like right now, we're working, we have a coalition-based work that we have going on right now in 3 cities. That's Detroit, that is Houston, and Detroit, Houston. I'm always getting in trouble because I'm always messing up one of the cities. But we have coalitions happening in these particular cities where we brought different organizations from the disability community, from racial equity, and from financial education organizations to help them come together so that they're not working in silos, so that the benefit is that we understand that there's intersecting identities in the disability community, And what we want to do is bring all of these different siloed organizations or siloed sectors together so that they can better help all people with disabilities, not just the ones that can reach them or the population that they are used to working with.
Pittsburgh was the third city.
Oh, thank you. And I just had a meeting with Pittsburgh earlier today. They are going to slap me on my hand. Thank you.
You're welcome. We took care of Pittsburgh. I didn't want to leave you out there hanging.
All right.
All right. So we had a question from the audience. Please do continue to add questions to the Q&A or even thoughts that are resonating with you. The first question is about culture. John, your mullet example has resonated. Is there a way to evaluate the culture of our institutions to determine how well we are being intentional about the educational, how well we are being intentional about the educational and workforce development needs for students with disabilities? And so I think we could probably all approach that in different ways. I think about OSER's and OSEP's intentions related to moving away from compliance to thinking about results and improved outcomes. So if anyone wants to jump in with thoughts on that.
Well, I can jump in. I think I lost a little bit with my internet connection, but I think with us and like the culture that we're trying to put out there is we're trying to shift the focus from a compliance or from a requirement to really focusing on people, right? Our whole focus is how do we shift the focus from accessibility from being a line of code or disability inclusion just being some line of act that we have to follow or we have to obey, but really shifting it to the focus on people and bringing in talented individuals, really focusing on the skills that people bring to the table, the experiences that people bring to the table. And I think if we start to shift from thinking about people as numbers, to shift it to actual people, that's a way we can really kind of change the culture of how we look at disability inclusion. And so that's something we really focus on, is people first.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would say it's something that we really are very intentional about in a number of ways. The federal special education law was first enacted in 1975. That was 48 years ago. We have in our last determinations, less than half of the states were meeting their requirements under IDEA. Those are numbers, right? But what's behind those numbers? And part of it is we can blame people for whatever, or we can try to support them and give them the tools they need to do the job they've been tasked to do. And I think that's what the approach we've been trying to take is rather than getting mad, right, which serves no purpose and benefits no one. It's what supports do we need and how can we really partner? And I think, Dr. McCray, your work at the Cedar Center is designed to make sure that new teachers understand that they're going to have diverse learners in their classroom from day one, and they shouldn't be shocked and horrified that they have kids with disabilities or kids who learn differently or kids that have different needs. And so we need to equip those people that are working with children and adults with disabilities to understand and have the resources so that they can really be that full partner. I think that's a huge part of what we are trying to do as we look at our words. And I think one of the challenges we have is we don't want people. We've had a lot of state directors of special education who are absolute salt of the earth, doing the very best they can. And we've done a lot of listening sessions. And one of the big challenges is the shortages of personnel, right? And they don't have enough money to buy the staff that they need. And so how do we try to support them in this completely suboptimal environment of supporting the people that are there and encouraging people to come into this field. And that's another place where I think culture really matters. Secretary Cardona talks about the fact that we need to do a better job as a country of respecting teachers, and I couldn't agree more. We need to respect people who are working on behalf of people with disabilities, so that they have the skill, they can demonstrate their abilities, and that we can get good outcomes for kids and adults. But if nobody will come to these jobs or they won't stay, we will never be able to train enough people if we don't retain them. And that's a huge part of our struggle right now.
I would just say, like, for NDI, we definitely build in equity into all of our projects overall, and we've been doing that for the past 6 years to make sure that when we are working with our stakeholders, or if it's an internal project, it doesn't always have to be external facing. We also still have to think about what we're doing internally, that everybody is included overall, right? And if there are gaps in inclusion, then we need to figure out who needs to be invited to the table, right? And sometimes, again, it's uncomfortable to say out loud, but you have to be okay with saying, okay, if you truly want change, then we're gonna have to, address the elephant in the room, right? We can't talk about the disability community without people with disabilities here, but then we also can't think that people with disabilities only look one certain way. There's many shapes and forms of this particular demographic. So how do we make sure that everyone feels like this is, that we're not just talking about them, right? That we're actually going to see some movement in that space. So I would say that's one of the things that has really been at the forefront of what NDI has been doing. And currently we are running a pilot. And I guess I can say this here. I'm looking for 2 additional organizations, but we're running a pilot as we speak, because to Kathy's point, there's a lot of turnaround happening, right? So you train this particular group of individuals, and then by the time the services need to be rendered, they're gone, and then we have this group of individuals who are not getting the services in which they need. So we developed some internal equity and inclusion enrichment trainings that the focus, so yes, it's DEI, but the focus is also disability, right? We've seen a lot of DEIA trainings where disability is spoken to, but it's like that caveat, right? Or I have a colleague of mine that she says about blueberry muffins. It's almost like they made a whole blueberry muffin, forgot the blueberries, and said, oh yeah, we got to stuff in blueberries at the end, right? We don't want that to continue. So our trainings that we're piloting right now with, we need 10 organizations to do it, is to give them these DEIA trainings and highlight disability so that when they're doing their work, they can do it differently, or at least figure out how they can make small changes. It's not big changes, but just these little small micro changes in order to make such lasting impact.
Thank you all so much. That reminds me of some recent reading I've been doing in the organizational literature that talks about making adaptive moves. Sometimes it's the continuous, small changes that we need to make in order to create bigger and lasting change. So thank you, John and Katie and Shahida, for joining us today. Tremendous opportunity to be in conversation with you. For those of you who have joined us, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Hunt Institute will share the recording and key takeaways in the coming weeks. They'll also continue to share opportunities to connect and learn together. I'd also like to spotlight the Hunt Institute's upcoming webinar on November 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, entitled Post-Secondary Pathways, What's Next? creating diverse student bodies in today's higher education landscape. So thank you all for joining us, and take good care.